Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be looking at notable Cinderella runs in Rainbow Six Siege. So a few caveats. We're mostly just going to be considering the events that have happened post-lockdown. So starting with SI 2021 and the Mexico Major onwards, we are going to look at one event from before that, which is the one already on the screen. We'll get to this in just a minute. And we are also only going to be considering runs that culminated in the team winning the event. So Astralis at SI, I think it was 2023. It was a really good run, but they only made it to 4th place. And Damwon in, I think it was Sweden, they almost made the grand final. Would have been, I guess, the best APAC performance of all time. They didn't quite do it, but still how they fell in also top 4 was impressive. But again, they didn't win the event, so we're not going to be looking at that. So okay, let's kick it off here with Pro League Season 10 Finals. This one's been in the conversation. I think there's sort of a big 4 in a lot of people's minds as far as the most unexpected victories in Siege. And so we'll kick it off with this one. I think this one really isn't very much in the running for number 1 though, because just the events weren't as rigorous back then. You didn't have a group stage or anything. You just played in a all best of 3 single elimination bracket, so the grand final not even a best of 5. And Na'Vi, they go on to win this. I think unexpected for a few reasons. At the time, North America and Europe were certainly the dominant forces in Rainbow Six Siege. APAC is, well, they're still APAC, but this is before Brazil became dominant. This is before Ninjas in Pajamas won SI, before FaZe won a major, before W7M created a dynasty, all that stuff. Brazil, they had a few notable results and maybe even a win or 2 under their belts. But Na'Vi, another reason this was unexpected, they're not playing with Doki. This is when he was banned or suspended or whatever. And so they have Pi on the roster, a bit of a downgrade, you might say. And I think probably the favorites to win this were some combination of Giants, Dark Zero, and Reciprocity. And along the way, we do see Na'Vi beat 2 of those teams. So they beat Wildcard, which is sort of whatever, but then they beat Reciprocity in 3 maps, and then they beat Dark Zero in the grand final in 2 maps. And this is most of or actually this is a very different Dark Zero roster from the one that would eventually win in Charlotte, Hyper being the only player that would remain on the roster, and I guess Mint would be the coach at the time. So yeah, I think sort of unexpected, but again, not a very taxing path to get there relative to more recent events. So we'll move on. We're going to look at the 6 invitationals next. So 2021, 2, 3, and 4, back to back, and then we'll go on to the majors. Because it's maybe easier to do it this way. It does break chronological order a little bit, but oh well. And the majors are the ones that really have the big runs to take a look at. So 2021 SI is won by Ninjas in Pajamas. Not a big surprise. They were the runner-up at the most recent event before this, which was actually 15 months prior, SI 2020. There were no events during that year or so period during lockdown. But yeah, the most recent event, even if it was quite a while ago, they were the runner-up, losing to Space Station, and then they win this one. So not a big shock. I think a lot of people thought this could happen, would happen, whatever the case. And one notable thing to look at, because it's going to become relevant in a little bit, is Team 1. And a little bit of a spoiler, but you probably see this one coming. Lagonis, KDS, Alamau, Levy, and Neskin. This roster will win the Mexico Major. They did win, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Just to give us a little bit of background, because this is 3 months before the Mexico Major. This is in, May, and that happens in, I think, August. And what do they do here? They go 4 and 5, but 5th place in the group, outplacing 5 other teams, Dark Zero, Furia, etc. And then in the bracket, they beat SSG, and this is the SSG roster that won 6 Invitational 2020, but this is a really broken roster because Canadian already departed the team. Luke played during the NAL, and then Luke was unable to play at SI because he didn't have a passport or something, so they asked Canadian to come back. So this was not an SSG firing on all cylinders, but they do beat them. And then they lose to Empire, who do actually lose the next round, but I guess Empire does lose to Liquid, who make it all the way to the grand final. Losing to Empire isn't the end of the world. They're a really good SI team historically. This is one of their worst, if not just their worst SI performance. They only make top 8 here, but we've seen them make top 2, top 3, etc. So not a terrible loss, I guess. And so they do have a little bit of pedigree leading up to their Mexico Major win. Anyways, we'll go back to that. Let's go to SI 2022 now. And this is won by TSM. Also not a huge shock, just like Ninjas in Pajamas. At SI 2020, TSM placed, I think, 3rd place, and then in 2021 they placed 4th place. So really good results leading to this one, and then they won. And the core of TSM, Merc, Bolo, Achieved, and I guess even Geo, is just a really, really successful one as far as SI goes. I think in 2020 they had Pojo Man, and then they got Chala for the following two. So the team changed slightly, but mostly the same team. They did really well at all 3 SIs they attended, so not a big surprise. Moving on to 2023, this does have the Astralis run. I mentioned before, they make it to the 4th place, and let's actually look at this really quickly because this was a special run. Like, go back and watch some of these games if you haven't seen them. We got to go all the way down here. They were seeded into the lower bracket after groups, but they beat Sonics in max regulation on map 3. They beat Los in map 3 max overtime. They beat BDS in map 3 max regulation, and they beat Koi in map 3 max overtime, finally losing to G2 2-0, who went on to win the event, so not too shabby. But anyways, talking about G2 now, their win I don't think was massively unexpected. I do think W7M was probably the favorite for this event, but G2 winning wasn't like a massive shock. It's not like you know, some of these teams won or whatever. Okay, so we can move past this one pretty easily onto the most recent SI, which was 2024. This was won by W7M. This is one of the few times in, I guess, in the history of Siege where the very clear favorite ended up winning the event. We usually see at least a little bit of a surprise, like maybe not the absolute top pick ended up winning the event, although W7M, they won here. And before this, they won at a major, and before that, they won at another major. So at this point, they were very heavy favorites, and maybe even at both of those events that they won, they were the favorite. But anyways, that's not so much what we're talking about here. We can easily eliminate this event. This was not a Cinderella run by any means. If you do zoom out a little bit, it sort of is, in that they made top 12 at Charlotte, and then the next 2 majors, they made top 4, and then the next SI, they were the runner-up, and then they won a major, won another major, and then won this. So in the really big grand scheme of things, it sort of is, but not this event in particular. Now we move on to the majors, starting with Mexico, which is the one won by Team 1, the team we were just looking at. And this one has a really big claim to fame in that along the way, they played the only tiebreaker match ever played in Siege. Maybe there was one in like a you know, T3 or T4 or a qualifier or something that I'm not aware of. But as far as the top tier competition, this is the only time a tiebreaker match has ever been needed. Let's take a look at it here. They were in a group with BDS, Cyclops, and Sonics. Sonics did really poorly. BDS did really well. And Team 1 and Cyclops were in the middle here. They went exactly even in terms of the record. So 3 wins in regulation, 2 losses in regulation, and 1 loss in overtime. They had the same number of points, and they won not the exact same number of rounds, but their round differential was the same. So it all came down to this very last match. They actually played each other. So coming into this one, if Cyclops won at least 3 rounds, they went forward, they advanced into the bracket. If Team 1 won 7-0 or 7-1, they advanced. But if it was 7-2, then they have to play a tiebreaker. And so they did so, and Team 1 won it. So absolute anticipation, and I don't know if it shows it here. I can't remember how early Cyclops got 2 rounds. I guess it was in the first half. So again, I don't remember if it was like Team 1 were up 3-1 and then it was 3-2 or what happened exactly, but Team 1 did have to string together a bunch of rounds in a row in order to push that tiebreaker match. It happened, and then they won, and then they went on to win the entire event. So this isn't the only thing. Let's take a look at what they did in the top 8. They beat Dark Zero, and this is most of the team that went on to win Charlotte. They don't yet have Canadian, they have BC instead, but they have Pamba and NJR and Hyper and Eclipse, so 4 of the 5 players that go on to win in Charlotte, some, you know, however many months later. And then they play against Liquid, who just before this were the runners-up at 6 Invitational, and they also had some impressive results after this at events, so you know, Liquid, a very good international team. And then they beat Empire, another really good international team. They won a major, not any of the ones that we're looking at, but they did win a major. They placed top 2, top 3 at SI. Like, they're really good internationally, historically. And Team 1, they 2-0 Dark Zero, but they had to go all 3 maps against Liquid. They actually 7-0'd them on Consulate. And they had to go all 5 maps against Empire, and they actually dominated them on the final map as well, 7-1 on Villa. So this one's definitely up there. I think it is pretty clearly a competition between this one and another one that we'll get into, which you probably know which one I'm alluding to, but I'll leave the mystery alive just a little bit. Anyways, let's move on to the next major, Sweden, and this one not a big shocker. FaZe end up winning this. They had a lot of really good players, and it was actually Brazil versus Brazil in the grand final, something that we've sort of gotten accustomed to quite a bit. Luckily, that was broken up in Manchester, but we've seen a lot of these starting at this point, and I guess even before this, because SI 2021 had Liquid up against Ninja Pajamas in the grand final. Anyways, FaZe winning, not a massive shock, so we can move pretty comfortably past this one. Then we have Charlotte, a bit of a weird event because a lot of the Brazilian teams, Team 1, W7M, and Furia, they couldn't make it to the US because of visa stuff or whatever, so they had to play from Mexico remotely, giving them, I guess, a ping disadvantage. But then Team 1 qualified for top 8, and some of their players were able to make it to the US, but some weren't, so a bunch of weirdness. Liquid, the only Brazilian team that was all present, and they actually made it to the top 4. But anyways, so sort of weird in that regard. Dark Zero ended up winning this on home soil, so not a massive shock. It was cool to see Canadian win something else. They were a really solid roster, maybe a bit of a Mickey Mouse major for the aforementioned reasons, but still, I don't think a Cinderella run by many accounts. Then we move on to Berlin, and we have the sort of the final candidate of, well, we'll get to the Beast Coast one, but I think you all know that that was clearly a candidate. So we saw Na'Vi in Tokoname, which was the Pro League Season 10 finals. We saw Team 1 at the Mexico Major, and now we have Rogue in Berlin. And what did they do? They were in a group with, they were in a fairly tough group. This is Damwon. They really fell off from 6 months ago in Sweden. But still, I think a lot of people thought they would show up better than they did. They had to play against NIP, who historically have been a really hot or cold team, but not too long ago, they were runner-up at SI and then SI victors. And then there's Rogue, which we're talking about, and then XSET, who actually managed to top the group. So maybe not the absolute hardest group we've ever seen, but still a competitive group. And then they make it into the top 8, and they play against G2, fellow European team. This was a surprise, I think. And then they play against XSET, who were in their group, and I think they went 1-1. XSET had 1 loss, and I think that loss was against Rogue. Yeah, so they were 1-1, so this was maybe a coin flip based on what we saw in groups, but Rogue do take it down, and then this was a heck of a grand final. It goes round 15 in 3 of the maps, and then it's a 7-4 and a 7-5 in the other 2 maps. And yeah, just round 15, map number 5, absolute insanity. The meta was really fun to watch here, really pioneered by Rogue, I guess, the whole aggressive echo thing. Maybe a lot of other teams weren't doing it, but at least the way that Rogue played this was really exciting, with Deepak droning on defense for Spoit a lot of the time. This was also Spoit's debut event. After his debut European stage, he was really good in Europe, his very first stage, and then he went on to be, I think pretty clearly, the MVP of this event. So a Cinderella run in that regard. I'm starting to lose my voice. So yeah, for a lot of reasons, for the fact that they certainly weren't the most anticipated team to do this, but also how they did it in the grand final, and then also the Spoit rookie factor. So a lot of things to consider there. Let's move on to Jönköping. This is won by BDS. Finally, they win something, and I guess actually up to this point they won like was it Korean Invitational or something, and they won Gamers 8, and they won some other thing. I don't know. They were winning a bunch of non-official things, but finally they win an official thing. And so, yeah, I don't think they were underdogs by any means. We don't really have to talk about this one much at all. And then we're moving into the Blast era. We have Copenhagen, which was won by W7M. So we don't need to talk about this. I mean, this is their first event. So again, if we're talking about that zoomed out perspective, the Cinderella run, finally they top 12, top 4, top 4, top 2. Finally, they win, but they were pretty clearly, I think, the favorites at this event. And then W7M win again in Atlanta, so we also don't need to talk about this one. And then we have the Manchester Major, the reason that we're talking about this at all, because obviously the biggest Cinderella run up to this point was Team 1 winning in Mexico. Like we talked about, Rogue was a surprising one, and Na'Vi in Tokoname was a surprising one, but it was pretty clearly Team 1 because of the team, and maybe we'll go back to it in just a minute to look at their background a little bit before the major, but let's talk about this one first since we're here. So yeah, Beast Coast, they win the whole thing, and for some, depending on how you look at it, some factors would lead you to draw the conclusion that this was not surprising because they were the top seed out of North America, and they had a lot of really tenured players. None of these guys had won an event, but we've seen, let's go look at the roster. Where do we have to go here? We've seen, well, Diffuser, absolute rookie, but Gaveni has played in majors and SIs, made deep runs with Dark Zero. Gunner, I think 2-time top 4 at majors with the Sonics. Hot and Cold, some good runs with Dark Zero way back in the day, but more recently some decent runs with Space Station. And Spirits, I think also top 4. I think he also made top 4 at a major with Xset, I want to say, the one where they lost to Rogue earlier. So yeah, they've had good results. They've made top 8s, top 4s, whatever. And the fact that they're all cobbled together is a big contributor to the magic of it. So, and also how things went in North America. So they were down 0-3 after their first 3 matches. They were looking like potentially the worst team in the league, and then they won all their matches from then on out. And actually, they haven't lost a match since they lost up again, or no, that's not technically true. They haven't lost, I guess, a match that ended up being significant since they lost to, I'm blanking, it's Wildcard, right? They did lose a couple of matches at this event, to be fair. They were best of ones though. Where they at? Yeah, they lost to Dark Zero and they lost to FaZe. So they have lost 2 matches. They're not on a pure streak, but they won 5 or 6 best of ones in a row in NAL after those 3 losses, and then they won 2 best of 3s to become the NAL champions, or was it? Yeah, I think it was just 2. And then they went 3-2 in Swiss here, with 2 of them being 2-0s in best of 3s. And then let's look at their bracket. They'd play against FaZe, and like nobody thought they were winning. I mean, pretty much everybody had Furia beating Liquid as a lock and FaZe beating Beast Coast as a lock. And then they had to play against Liquid, who just beat Furia. The team, so Liquid just ended the only dynasty ever seen in modern day Siege by defeating Furia, formerly W7M, and then Beast Coast beat them. And then they have to play against BDS, absolute, maybe the biggest super team we've ever seen, and they beat them. It does take all 5 maps, but they do so. No overtime, unfortunately, but a lot of 12 rounders. I guess the last 3 maps all went 12 rounds. So yeah, magical stuff. The fact that they were cobbled together, the fact that they were not quite backs against the wall, because you only have to place like top 6 or whatever to make playoffs in NA. But still, they were looking so bad, and then they became so good so quickly. And so I guess I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. Let's actually go back really quickly though and look at Team 1 one more time. Not in Mexico specifically. Let's go. How long is this going to take? I go here, and then we'll go to their extended list of results. So the only ones we really need to look at here are Stage 1 and 6 Invitational and Stage 2 in the Mexico Major. So they went 4-5, not spectacular. They got 6th place in Brazil, but then they made top 3 in Copa Elite 6, losing to Liquid, who eventually made it to the grand final of 6 Invitational. And then we saw what they did at SI. They made it out of their group. They beat Space Station, and then they lost to Empire. And then in stage number 2, they go 10-8. They had a format change. They played a lot more maps, but 10-8, a lot better than 4-5. And then they get 2nd place in Copa Elite 6, losing to Ninjas in Pajamas, who were at that point the reigning world champions. And then they go to Mexico and complete their run. So I think this is really important. The fact that they were an established team up to this. They got, again, not great in Brasileiro Stage 1, but top 3 in Copa Elite 6. Okay performance at SI 2021, and then 2nd place in Copa Elite 6, going into the Mexico Major. So they were actually the 2nd seed out of Brazil, who were just very dominant at SI 2021 before that. So I think if you consider those factors and the fact that, again, Beast Coast, some impressive results as individuals, but no results whatsoever as a team, I think that gives Beast Coast the edge. And Team 1 also has that tiebreaker match. Like, that is massive in deciding this, but I'm going to give it to Beast Coast. We'll see how everybody feels in, a few months, in a year's time or whatever, when the Beast Coast win isn't so fresh in our minds, because Team 1, they won 3 years ago. Maybe a little bit of the magic has worn off, but I want to know what you guys think. So I guess we just spent 20 minutes looking at Liquipedia and drawing a few conclusions. I think if I had to rank them, probably I'd say Beast Coast, then Team 1, then I guess Rogue, because it's a much tougher path to win a major nowadays than it was to win a Pro League season back then. And then in last place, 4th place, you know, still top 4 or whatever, is the Navi win. And maybe I'm forgetting one. Let me know if there's one I'm forgetting. I think that's going to do it for me, because at this point we're really just dragging it on. So subscribe, like, comment, that's all very much appreciated, and I will catch you guys next time.